Hello and welcome to another edition of Personal Health and Fitness. I'm your host, Chad Marshak. My program today is on pulling exercises. I think oftentimes people, when they exercise, kind of neglect working on the back muscles, the pulling muscles, specifically your lats, your rhomboids, lower middle trapezius muscles. The lats help to extend the shoulder, so this is extension, all right? The lower middle traps and the rhomboids help to adduct and or retract the shoulders. So posturally, oftentimes people are focused more on the pushing muscles, and from a postural standpoint, when you become really tight here anteriorly in the front and the chest, it kind of pulls you into this position. So it's really important to balance out those anterior muscles with the posterior muscles, the muscles that help to retract the shoulders and kind of keep those shoulders aligned where they should be so that you don't have shoulder pain. And then the strength in your upper back can help provide more stability for a lot of exercises, from squatting to pressing. So really important to strengthen those upper back muscles, lower middle trap muscles, and the paraspinal muscles along your spine and your lower back. So I'm going to share with you today a lot of different exercises that we use here at Body Symmetry. Some of them may be new to you, might look a little bit different, but again, I think it's important to kind of open your mind, have a better understanding about some of the other things in terms of exercises that might be out there to help you, okay? So we're going to go through about 8 to 10 exercises today. I'm going to kind of explain each movement. I'll talk a little bit about the rep schemes involved and why different reps for different exercises might be more appropriate than others. So let's start with this first exercise here. The first exercise I want to demonstrate is an inverted row. Now I'm going to demonstrate this using what's called a Swiss bar, and if you look at the Swiss bar here, has several different positions in terms of where you could grip the bar. Regular straight Olympic bar, you just use an overhand grip or an underhand grip. And this allows you to use an overhand grip or an underhand grip, or two different parallel grips as well. One's got kind of an angle here, and then you've got a straight parallel grip. So that's going to elicit a different response in your back when you're actually doing a rowing type movement. And that's very important to consider. You want to actually change a lot of the exercise that you do on a consistent basis. So any type of what I call accessory movement that you're going to do, for example, some of your big core movements might be a squat or a deadlift or some type of a bench press type movement. Accessory movements that don't necessarily work, from head to toe, some of your bigger, larger muscle groups, you're going to want to change and rotate those exercises. So all of these exercises today could be considered accessory movements that you might want to consider using in your regimen. So the inverted row here, using a Swiss bar, you're going to lie on your back. You can do this a couple of different ways. If you're not quite as strong, you're going to want to bend your knees like so, and then position yourself so that your arms are perpendicular to the floor. And then you're going to pull yourself up. And you want to pull yourself up, not quite all the way, but up far enough that you feel your shoulders kind of adduct. That means that you will actually feel your shoulder blades move in towards your spine. And that's really important. You want to make sure that those shoulder blades, your scapula, move around your rib cage, and that's what they're supposed to do. So when you go to the top, retract those shoulder blades. If you want to make this a little bit harder, you can straighten your legs. You can also change the grip. If you want to use an overhand grip, a little bit wider, or this narrow grip, it's going to change it yet again. So changing the grip is going to change the neural demands in the muscles in your back, all right? So straightening the legs, it's going to make it harder versus placing your feet here like so. And I like to hold a lot of these exercises, say, for a 1 count. So the inverted row is a perfect exercise that you can do where you can isometrically hold that particular contraction, say, for a 1 count. So time under tension is really important, especially for those of you that are interested in, say, hypertrophy, somebody who's trying to add lean body mass. So typically the research has shown that an exercise should last, if you're really working on those hypertrophy muscles, wanting to create more lean body mass, that the time under tension should be approximately 50 seconds. So I see a lot of people in gyms, when they're going through a particular exercise and they're trying to gain lean body mass, they fail, say, within 15, 20 seconds. Well, you're not really in your wheelhouse. So you want to extend that set a little bit longer to get to that sweet spot of about 50 seconds. So to do that, instead of, say, doing more repetitions, you can actually hold an exercise or hold contraction for a greater period of time. So for example, if you did 10 repetitions, each rep would take approximately 5 seconds in terms of the concentric and the eccentric phase, or the shortening phase and the lengthening phase of a particular movement. So that's something that you definitely want to consider. So that's how you use a Swiss bar. If you're a gym or you are lucky enough to have one of these bars, it's a nice tool. It allows you to do a lot of different pressing exercises too. But that's a nice way to work the upper back muscles. The next thing I want to demonstrate is how to, an alternative way to use a trap bar for a row. And this is actually called a trap bar row. So trap bar typically used for deadlifts, trap bar deadlifts, and also an exercise called a farmer walk where you actually carry it. It's often used in strongman training. But you can use this to row with too. So you'll grab the parallel bars here like so. You're going to line your feet up. Your feet should be about hip width. Drive your hips back. Grab the bar. And you're going to pull from the ground straight up. And you're going to hold that. So you think about holding dumbbells, but now you're going to use a trap bar. So you can load a lot more weight on a trap bar typically than using heavy dumbbells. So it's a little bit different twist. So rep-wise on an exercise like this, you're probably going to do anywhere between 3 and 6 reps. Use a little bit heavier weight. This is an exercise that you're going to use a light load and crank out 15, 20 reps. So it's more for getting stronger. Say pulling off the floor. So to increase your pulling or your grip strength, using a trap bar is going to help your deadlift. So a lot of people are trying to get stronger with their deadlift. Great, use a trap bar and try this trap bar row action. So again, look at my spine angle, really important when you set up that you want to drive the feet back or drive the hips back. Nice flat back. You don't want to round your back like so when you're pulling. And the same idea, when you get to the top of the movement, you want to think about adducting your shoulder blades, retracting your shoulder blades, which is going to really work the entire posterior chain of your body, your entire back. This exercise is also really going to nail your hamstrings and your hips, your glutes. So pull, hold, down. You can elect to go all the way down to the floor if you want, and then pull from the floor. This is more about starting strength from the ground up. So a little bit different twist, whether you just go not quite to the floor or all the way to the floor. Really 2 different movements. So try each variation for this particular exercise. Good exercise. In terms of sets, really depending on what your goal is. But a good rule of thumb is you're going to shoot for anywhere between 2 and 4 sets for most of these exercises. Your rest interval, depending on what you're going for and what your focus is, typically though for most people it's going to be anywhere between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. If you're supersetting this exercise, say with a pushing exercise, that's certainly acceptable as well. So the next thing I'm going to demonstrate is a single arm barbell row. And this is something that's a little bit different, and that when we think of rowing with a barbell, we're usually doing a bent over row like so. But you're actually going to use the bar as you would a dumbbell. And it makes it a lot harder because of the long lever here. So in terms of grip strength, your gripping muscles in your forearm have to work a lot more. So you're going to bend over, drive your hips back, your arms perpendicular to the floor, and you want to load the inside leg. So my right glute, my right hamstring is really firing hard to maintain my stability. Nice flat back. I'm going to pull straight up, hold it for 1 count, and then straight down. So think about if I actually had weight added plates on each end, that's going to create a much more challenge, a greater challenge in terms of maintaining the balance in the bar. So this is a hard exercise. A lot of people, they can't necessarily use a ton of weight. But rep scheme on something like this, because it's so demanding grip strength wise and loading through the hip, you're going to keep the reps relatively low, anywhere between say the 4 and 8 range for most people. So that's a good exercise again to kind of a different spin on doing a barbell row. Makes it a lot harder again, grip strength wise. So we're going to use a regular barbell and talk about different rowing actions you can do with a barbell. I like to do an exercise off the floor that I call a barbell floor row. So this is more about starting strength. I kind of demonstrated over here with the trap bar deadlift how you take the weight and you lower it all the way to the ground, you come to complete stop. Very similar to doing, if you've ever done a barbell floor press or a dumbbell floor press where you lie on your back and you bring your elbows all the way to the floor and you come to complete stop. That's more about starting strength for pushing. Now we're going to focus more on starting strength for pulling. So pulling the load off the floor as you would, say, using a trap bar or barbell when you're doing any type of a deadlift. So we're going to pull this bar from the ground up and set it completely down. It's not going to be free floating like you see a lot of people do, but come to a complete stop. So same idea, overhand grip, drive your hips back, nice flat back, look straight down at the ground, you'll pull straight up almost to your sternum, and drop it all the way to the ground. So you can really load up a lot of weight on this exercise because the hamstrings have to lengthen in this position. My glutes are really firing. It's kind of a whole body lift. You can also change your grip if you want. So if you want to use a reverse grip, you'll turn your hands around and pull a little bit lower beneath the sternum, more into the upper gut region. Good. Same idea. When I'm pulling, if you look at the action of my back, I'm trying to retract my shoulders at the top regardless of my grip. But don't retract your shoulders so much that your anterior part of your shoulder comes forward. I see people when they're doing, say, a one-arm dumbbell row, they're pulling up so high that the front of their humerus jams into their bicep tendon, and that creates a lot of impingement type syndrome in the front of the shoulder. So you want to think about rowing to a point where you're retracting your shoulders, but your humeral head still stays in that, centered right there in the glenoid, in the joint itself. And that's important, that you don't want to see this action happening. So when that happens, it creates tightness here in the front of the shoulder, but it also, because your long head of your bicep tendon runs right through the front here, the front part of your shoulder, it will pinch that and impinge that and potentially create some problems there. So that's another thing that you want to consider when you're doing any type of a pulling type action, any type of a pulling movement. All right, the next exercise I'm going to demonstrate is a kettlebell sumo row. So kettlebells are all over the place now. You see them a lot in CrossFit classes, regular gyms for that matter. But I like using kettlebells for a host of different exercises. It's just different than a dumbbell, a little bit different twist. So this is called a sumo row, and this is an exercise that a little bit different, looks a little bit odd. The setup is something that you have to pay attention to. So when I'm going to get in position, I'm going to get in what I call a sumo stance. If you've ever watched a sumo wrestler, they get their legs nice and wide here. So you want to have a nice wide base, all right? And you're going to drive your hips back, angle your feet out about roughly 30 degrees. You want to think about spreading your knees out, okay? So when I get into this position, I'm down like so, like a sumo wrestler, all right? And I'm going to grab my kettlebell. I'm driving my right elbow into the ground or into my shin or upper thigh, and I'm going to pull straight up like so. So this forces my hips to work really hard. So not only is it a back exercise, but it's also a whole body exercise because I'm involving my hamstrings and my glutes. So a great whole body exercise, you're really strengthening yourself from really toenails to fingernails. But again, a different movement than, say, just doing a regular dumbbell row. This is more about kind of whole body action, like so. And I turn my hand slightly so that my elbow comes up more to the side. So it's coming in close to my body. If you look from kind of from behind what's happening, my elbow's in here. I'm not out, like so. So keep that elbow in, the elbow tight. Again, think about retracting the shoulders at the top. This exercise, you're probably going to keep your reps anywhere between 6 and 10. So use a heavy enough load that you almost fail. I like to leave what I call 1 or 2 reps in the tank. Typically, I never go to failure, You don't want to beat your nervous system up that bad. So make sure that you've got 1 or 2 more reps that you can do on all of these particular exercises. That's a safe way to go about training for most people. Okay, next I'm going to talk about a bench row here. You can use the bench if you have a bench at your home or in the gym to do a lot of different exercises. I like doing Y's and T's off the bench in a prone position. I like doing different type of rowing patterns off the bench, and I'm going to show you a real basic one off the bench, especially for anybody that really has a hard time getting into some of the positions with their spine that I've demonstrated so far. You can use the bench as a tool to help protect your back and really ensure that you're in a good postural position. So take the bench, set it about roughly 45 degrees, and you're going to grab some dumbbells and lie face down on your stomach like so. So if you look at my legs, they're straight, all right? My feet are on the ground. If you're shorter, then you can take a pad or something, put it on the seat and put your knees on it as well. But in this position, my arms are perpendicular to the floor, palms facing each other. I'm looking down at the ground. I'm not looking up. I see so many people when they're doing rowing movements, they're throwing their cervical spine, their head up. Really bad for your neck. I'll talk about that if I have time at the end, about positioning of your head. So looking down at the ground, you're going to pull straight up, hold up for a 2 to 3 count. Same idea. I like keeping my elbows close to my body, retracting my shoulders at the top. Again, I'm trying to think about retracting my shoulder blades so my lower middle traps work. My lats are working on this exercise as well. Great exercise. Again, if you have issues with getting into, say, a position like this or like this, and you tend to round your back too much, the bench here will allow you to kind of get into a better postural position. Again, great exercise for those of you that don't have the strength, that can't really maintain that proper postural alignment. Okay, next I'm going to demonstrate some more advanced, what I call functional exercises for the back, but also really whole body for the lower extremities as well. And this is a dumbbell row that I like to do, especially with a lot of pitchers that I work with. It forces them to use their hips in such a way that it simulates how they throw a baseball. Typically when you see a throwing athlete and finish up, they're out here and their legs coming through, and they always end up typically on one leg. Well, I want to train that leg, the posterior chain, the glute, the hamstring complex, this whole complex on the backside. But at the same time, I also want to stress the muscles in the upper back, because with throwing a baseball, the lats are very much responsible for extending the shoulder, all right? So when you bring that arm down, that action, your lats are working tremendously. So you're going to balance on one leg for this exercise. This isn't for everyone. If you don't have good balance and stability, you probably you want to be very careful with this. So I'm going to balance on one leg and I'm going to bend over. Now if I fall over because I'm talking and exercising at the same time, then I do. So I'm going to get in this long position here, look down at the ground, and then I'm going to bring my arms straight up. So usually you're going to keep your reps anywhere between, say, 6 and 8 on each side. So look down at the ground, retract those shoulders. Same idea as if you're doing it this way. You still want to retract those shoulders and keep that spine angle. It's a tough exercise, but you want to think about getting nice and long through that trailing leg, looking down at the ground. You're going to really feel your hamstring and your hip work at the same time as your upper back is working. But tough exercise. But length in that trailing leg, really important. So something like that, it's a lot, that particular exercise, a lot more demanding in terms of your nervous system. So you want to be careful and cautious in terms of how many sets you're going to do with something like that. Maybe 2 to 3 sets max. Start with a lighter load in the beginning so you get the balance and the action down. There's nothing wrong with simulating an exercise without an external load, using a weight. First, if you can master that, if you can't do that, then why add a weight? That's when people get hurt. So really, any type of a new exercise, lighten the load you use. Don't make it so hard that you can't do it. You can gradually progress, add an external load, and once you master it, and then you can start ramping up the weight just like you would with any other particular exercise. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a plate row next. I really like this exercise because it works on your grip strength a little bit differently than, say, holding onto a dumbbell or a kettlebell. But you're going to grab some plates, some Olympic plates, and you can do two different types of rows with this, actually many rows, but I'm going to just demonstrate two. But I'm going to start with my hips back, looking down at the ground, and I'm just doing a row like I would holding dumbbells. But I'm gripping the plates. A lot harder to do this exercise because of the pinch grip strength in your fingers compared to, say, holding a dumbbell or a kettlebell in your hands. So the gripping muscles of the fingers have to work that much harder. You can also progress that exercise and do a split stance if you want. So now I'm going to put 90% of the load on my forward leg, slightly bend over, look down at the ground. But you really have to think about driving that heel into the ground when you do this exercise. So my left heel is driven into the ground big time. My trailing heel, if you look, is off the floor. So a lot of balance on that forward leg, but the hamstring and the glute has to work tremendously on this exercise. So you may want to do anywhere between 6 and 8 reps on each leg when you try this exercise. Same idea, start light, master the movement, then increase the load. Grab a drink. Okay. Banded rowing, super bands, you see them all over the place. A lot of different exercises that you can do with bands, but they're cheap and inexpensive. If you want to use, say you have a home gym, don't have a lot of money, these are great because you can tie them off to something secure in your house. Probably not a door, but if you have a post in a basement, you can use that, or some type of a secure structure. If you have a power rack like this, you can use that as well. But you can take these bands that come in a host of different sizes. Here's a 4-inch band. It's probably 150 to 200 pounds of pressure when you pull. But depending on the exercise. So for this exercise, this is probably 50 to 75 pounds of pull. I'm going to tie this off about slightly lower than my chest. And I can use this band, get in a split stance, and I can do a row. So most of the tension at the top, when I pull all the way out, this is the greatest force right here. So the tension is going to change on something like this. So be mindful of that. So again, split stance, reach out. And if you want, you can do more of a reaching row where you're reaching forward, which I'm loading my hamstring, my hip complex, and then coming upright and then pulling. So reach out, trailing heels off the ground, come up and pull. So reps on something like this, depending on the tension that you use, if it's a higher tension, that your rep scheme is going to be typically lower, anywhere between the 4 to 6 to 8 range. If you're using a lighter band on something like this, then anywhere between, say, 10 and 15 reps. And again, you can do multiple sets as well. So a great tool, great exercise, just provides a different type of resistance. And you can change this around if you want, and then you can go with both at the same time. And this is a lot harder, and especially when you bring it back. If I get into a split stance, I got too much weight here, but I don't have much time left. So you can also use it, again, both hands at the same time, little bit easier in terms of teaching somebody how to do it using both hands at the same time. Okay, the last exercise I want to demonstrate is one of my favorite exercises, and that's using a cable machine to do a reaching row. Reaching rows are one of the most functional exercises you could do because it trains the decelerators on the backside, your glutes and your hamstrings, to do what they should do, and that's slowdown momentum. So you can take a cable machine in a gym. You can either do a single arm or you can do both arms at the same time. But the key on this exercise is to get in a split stance. So you're going to reach out, load forward, and then come up. So if I'm a throwing athlete especially, or even if I'm any sport really, you end up getting in this position when you run. Okay? You're in a split stance position, and the hamstrings and the glutes are really working like crazy here. So reaching out, bending over, trailing off the ground, and come up and pull into your rib cage. Reach out, reach out, reach out. This is a lot harder than what it looks because most of what I'm feeling is in my glute and my hamstring. You can't use so much weight when you're using a cable machine that when you bend forward, you can't get back up because the load's too great for the hip to work properly. All right, so you have to use submax loads on an exercise like this. And typically I really like the 8 to 10 range whenever I'm using a cable machine doing any type of a reaching row movement. So a lot of different pulling movements out there, pulling exercises. So hopefully I gave you an assortment of different things that you could attempt to do, try to incorporate into your training regimen. Hopefully it will help you with your personal health and fitness goals. The last thing I want to touch on again is head position. When I see people bending over, looking up, it's the same when they're doing a rowing movement. It's the same thing as standing and talking to me like this, looking up. So you're going into cervical hyperextension. Not really a healthy thing for the spine and the neck. So be mindful of that. Whenever you're doing a row, the cervical spine should be in a nice neutral position as you were standing up talking to anyone. Thanks again for joining me on another edition of Personal Health and Fitness. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, I'm your host, Chad Marshak. Hey, Quinn and Riley.